Hey everyone, welcome back for part 2 of this little mini series where we're working to build this advanced responsive form. Last time we dug into the tooltip here, which sort of emulates absolute positioning in CSS. And so we have this toggle here on the right with the visibility. We can toggle it on and off. And as we type some custom text here, we can see that we're using auto layout, so the tooltip grows. And also we've got it sort of nested with this little label here. So if the username or label gets longer, we'll see that everything is sort of connected so that we don't have to continually rearrange the tooltip and reposition it. But also we can see that the tooltip is sort of hovering above these inputs. And so the way we've built it, it actually doesn't disrupt the flow of the other auto layout elements surrounding it. So that's just a brief overview of where we ended off last time. And today we're going to dive into the buttons here. And we're not going to go super in depth in how to build the most awesome buttons in the world, because we're actually more interested in how we can combine buttons and sort of build on the awesome capabilities of auto layout. So we'll see the use case here is I have this form and it's kind of a desktop size potentially. And so if I resize it, at some point I might want for my buttons to stack. And I can easily do that, with the auto layout direction controls here in the right panel. And so I'll go ahead and do this, but we'll see that now I have to actually come in here and select each of these buttons, switch them to HUD contents and fill container, go back out to select the button group frame there and switch that to HUD contents. And now finally I've got my buttons stacked. And auto layout is great because I can easily rearrange these. So now I actually want my submit button to be above my cancel button. And so this is all really great, but what happens when we go to templatize this dialog and we no longer have the ability to rearrange the order of elements or even to change the direction of the auto layout? So if I just come back over here to this example, we'll see that now when this button group is a component, this auto layout direction is locked. And so now we've lost the ability to change the direction. We also can no longer rearrange the order. So I'm using the arrow keys and nothing's working there. I might try to drag them in the layers panel, but the order is now locked. So that's a current limitation of auto layout that doesn't allow for us to change the order of elements or even the direction of the auto layout. And so this button group component is sort of going to allow us to get around of those things when we're using auto layout inside a component. So I'll go ahead and demo that real quick before we get started. We'll see I've got my button group component here on the left, and it has two properties here on the right panel. The first is the direction, which is going to allow us to go from horizontal to vertical. And we have beautiful auto layout hugging built into the component. But then we also have this more interesting reverse property here. So I'm just going to toggle this on, and we'll see that we can actually reverse the order or the flow of the elements within the auto layout. So if that sounds as exciting to you as it did to me when I discovered this technique, well, then please stay tuned and let's build it together. Okay, cool. So let's begin. I'm just going to go ahead and create a little text layer here, type the word button, and I'm going to make sure I'm using the correct text style that I'd like. This is just one from my beta library. You can use your own, of course. And I'll go ahead and select my color text dark here. And I'm going to just quickly create an auto layout around it using the keyboard shortcut Shift A. And I'm just going to go ahead and adjust some of the spacing here. So we're creating our button structure not our actual buttons yet. If you're not familiar with structures, Figma actually has some great tutorials explaining what structures are. But without further ado, let's just get right to it. So just adjusting some of the spacing here. And I'm also going to make sure that my text is centered within this auto layout. So I can quickly demo that. When I drag it around, the text stays centered as opposed to being pinned to the top left there. Cool. So just going to go ahead and leave that centered there. Now we've created our button structure. Almost going to go ahead and create a component out of this. So I did that by clicking the keyboard shortcut Command-Option-K. And now I'm going to go ahead and rename this frame to underscore button structure. So again, if you're not familiar with structures or even what this underscore is, they're not really related, but underscores or periods can be used in naming schemes to prevent components from being exported with the final output of the library. So the structure is sort of a helper component that we can insert into our main component that people will actually use. So with this selected, I'll go ahead and click the plus sign here on the right to create some variants. And this is where we're going to go ahead and create our icon button. So just going to search for my moon icon here. Perfect. Just going to drag this in. Beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and clear that and go back to the layers panel so you can all see what I'm doing. Good. And so something I like to do is anytime I create a variant group, if it's sort of a simple variant group that works well to be laid out in one direction, then I just go ahead and add an auto layout, change it to the direction I want, adjust the padding as needed. And that's just going to sort of like help my variant group grow as items are added without me really needing to be resizing it to keep adjusting it. Okay, cool. So now that we have our two buttons here, I'm just going to go ahead and create or rename this property to type. And I'm going to name the default one text only. I'm going to name my second one icon left. And I'm going to go ahead and create an additional one with the keyboard shortcut Command D and rename this one to icon only. So I'm going to come in and select this text layer, and I'm actually going to hide it. So I can do Command Shift H, or I can hide it over here in the layers panel. But what that's going to do is allow the text to be preserved through every variant when the user edits the text. And finally, I just need to adjust some of this padding here, 12 all around, and we're good to go. So I don't need any sort of background colors or really to be focused on like the text colors or icon colors. All that is going to be done in the final output of this. But I'm going to go ahead and create another property. And this property is going to be size. And I'm selecting all three of these. I'm just going to press Command D again. And now rename this size to be small. And bump those all the way over to the right, just using the arrow keys. Now I'm going to go ahead and select all three of these and rename them to be standard. So that's my standard size button. Cool, so I just have to come in and adjust some of the padding here. I'm going to go ahead and click on this little alignment padding icon, change the padding top to be 8, 24 left and right. Perfect. And then the space between is going to be 8. And then the icons, I'm going to go ahead and command click on those. Those are actually going to be 20 pixels instead of 24 pixels. Finally, I have to adjust some of the space here. So I can change that to 8, but it doesn't matter too much since there's only one element in there. But then the padding around is going to be 10 pixels. Cool. Okay, so now we have our structure pretty much good to go. So I'm just going to go ahead and create an instance of this by holding Option and clicking and dragging it out. And I'm actually going to create a component around this button structure instance. So Command Option K to do that. I'll go ahead and give it a fill background color here. Just going to give it my primary color. And under selection colors, I'm going to select text dark and change that to white. Okay, so now I can go ahead and give this a border radius, maybe 1,000 would be awesome. That way it can always be round no matter how big it gets. Cool. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on the plus sign again to create more variants. And then go ahead and click on the button on the variant group again and rename this to button. So we had our structure and now we have our button component. Cool. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and rename this property to be type, and then this first button I'm going to go ahead and rename to be text only. The second button is going to be icon only. And so we're essentially right now recreating some of the properties that were in our structure. So I'm going to go ahead and select the button structure inside of the second button and change it to icon left just so that it matches. And actually I rename this, this should be icon left. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate this one more time, and this one's going to be icon only. Oops. Icon only, there we go. And I'm just going to press enter here to get inside of this variant and then change that to icon only. Now with both of these selected, I can come back to selection colors and change text dark to white. Perfect. So now we have all three of our primary buttons here with the three types, but I can go ahead and create another property called size, and here's where I'm going to duplicate these once again and change the size to small. I'll select the top three, make sure the size is standard. And selecting the bottom three again, I'm just going to press enter. That will allow me to select each structure and quickly change the value of the size property to small. Okay, so now let's just drag one of these out and take a look and see what's going on. So we can see that because we're using auto layout, our button grows automatically, and that's really awesome. But what if we resize it? Oh, okay, so it looks like the text isn't being centered exactly where we want it. So we know we just need to come back over here, select each of these variants, and change some of our alignment and padding. So we're just going to go ahead and center this once again. So now it's centering the structure within this button. Perfect. So now we can see that we have a button that works just as well if we want it to hug contents, but one that we can also resize if we need sort of a full width button. Okay, so now I'm just going to delete that, and we can go ahead and add another property. So this property is going to be called state, and we're going to go ahead and click here on default, change that to enabled, and selecting each one of these, I'm just going to sort of drag this over to the right. And now I'm going to actually come in here, select each one of these, and holding option, I'm going to just click and drag over to the left here. You can rearrange these however you'd like, but we're just going to go ahead and create our hover state, and then go ahead and change the primary to primary hover. Cool, so now we already have 3 different types of buttons, 2 sizes, 2 states, and really all that's left to do is go ahead and create the additional style. So we'll create a new property, and call this first style primary. Now I'm just going to command click and drag from outside of the variant group, making sure I select all of the variants, and I'll just option click drag over to the right here and call this style secondary. Perfect. So going down to the selection colors, I'm just going to go ahead and change all the primary colors here to gray 1 and the primary hover colors to gray 2. And now I'll select all of the white colors and change those to text dark. So now we very quickly have created a button component that has 4 different properties, and it's ready to go. Responsive, can be stretched to be full width. So now we're ready to go ahead and get started on the famous button group. Cool. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit space there. Just kind of like to get these nice and neat. Beautiful. So I'm just going to come down here and drag an instance out of this button. We'll go ahead and test it. We see that we can change it from icon left to icon only. We have the different sizes here, the different states, the different styles. And what's better is if we go to the type here, text only, we'll see that all of the changes made are saved. Cool. So I'm just going to go ahead, change this to icon left. That's saved. Back to the primary style. I'm going to click on our moon icon, change this to maybe the profile icon, and then switch this to icon only. And still, everything is maintained. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and just reset all overrides here and change this back to the text only button and to the enabled state. Perfect. So now with this button, what we actually want to do is again create a button group. So we're just going to create a duplicate here. We've got 2 buttons, and we're going to select both and create an auto layout around them with the shortcut Shift A. If you aren't a fan of shortcuts, you can always come over to the right and just click plus, and that's going to create an auto layout around them as well. Cool. So we're going to go ahead and rename this to button group, and then go ahead and make a component out of this. So I'm going to do that with Command Option K, or of course you can come up here and click the Create Component button. Awesome. So now that we have this, we're going to go ahead and create some variants, and go ahead and select the button group again, rename this first property to direction, and go ahead and name this first one horizontal. The second one, we're going to change the auto layout direction to be vertical, and then we'll update this value to be vertical as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and create an auto layout here around the button group variant. Again, I do that just because it helps the whole variant group sort of seamlessly adjust as the number of variants inside grow, just like that. I don't have to keep resizing it. Cool. So now that we have that, let's just go ahead and test this out. We have our 2 buttons here within this button group, and we'll see that we have a direction property. When we switch it to vertical, we'll see that we automatically get a vertical direction for our auto layout. And we'll see that it's locked, right? So this is precisely why we might use this technique, is to change the direction of elements within a component that is using auto layout. So we'll see if we want to go ahead and resize this. Those aren't really working the way I would hope. I think if I'm going to stack my buttons, I probably want them to go full width. So we're going to go ahead and just click these arrows here, or the drop down, change it to fill container. And now we'll see that as soon as we switch it from the horizontal to the vertical button group, that these are still hugging contents. So our button group grows, and then when we switch to vertical, it automatically goes to the full width there. Cool. And then of course, this is kind of up to you whether when they're horizontal, you still want them to be hug contents or not. If not, you can easily switch them to fill container here. So it's kind of up to you, but for me, at least by default, I'm going to leave them to be hug contents. Okay, so I think this is a really good place to stop and just sort of like recap everything that we've done so far. We created this button structure here, and we haven't really seen why that's useful yet. So the button structure allows us to sort of create a skeleton for the main components that minimizes how much we need to go in and edit all of these variants. And you can imagine with buttons, you may have more than 100 variants if there's any changes to the core of those buttons. So we'll see that if in the future we decide that we actually want the icon to be on the right, all those changes are automatically reflected in every variant here. Of course, I don't want that here for this button, so I'm just going to undo that. Then we created our actual button component, which will be exported. We'll see that the structure has the underscore, and that's actually going to keep it from being exported to the final output of the library. We can still, of course, access it through the assets panel within this file. But then we have our buttons with all of these cool properties. And then finally, we got down to the button group component, where we've just put 2 buttons in a group here. You could, of course, add more buttons, and then it'll just continue to grow there. However many buttons you have in one version, you want to try to have the same amount of buttons in the other. So for this tutorial, we're just going to stick with 2, keep it simple. But now I think we're ready to actually go ahead and be able to reverse the order of these buttons here. So we're just going to go ahead and create a new property here that's called reverse. And Figma is really cool because it allows us to not only have drop-down lists to change from different values, but also allows us to create a toggle. So we'll see that in just a minute. First, I'm going to go ahead and select my button group here and rename this first value to be false. And so the reason for that is because these buttons are in their initial order. And so the reverse property would be false. And so now that we have this property, I'm just going to go ahead and select both of these variants and just duplicate them. And as soon as I do that, it's going to go ahead and highlight this field. I'm going to set that to true. And I'm going to go ahead and just move those down. And we'll see that now when I select my button group instance, it's changed to a toggle here. But we click it, nothing's happening just yet. And so that's where we're going to do a little trick here. We're going to go ahead and just rename these layers to button 1, button 2. Select this first one here, that's button 1. This one's button 2. And now we're going to do the same thing. Button 1, button 2. But just as I press enter, I'm actually going to move this over to the left here. And we'll see that we instantly saw it swap here on the right in this instance. And I think that's magic. So I think that's awesome. We're going to go ahead and continue here, button 1 and button 2. And then again, move this one up to the top, either using the arrow keys or dragging it in the layers panel. So I'm just going to go ahead and reset all of the overrides and get this button back to its initial state here. And to help illustrate what's going on, I'm just going to go ahead and number these 1 and 2. And then we'll see that when we switch it to the vertical direction, they stack exactly how we want. But then when we toggle the reverse order, now the 2 is on top. So what's actually happening is Figma's tracking which buttons are named what and it knows that we've reversed the order of them. So it allows us to rearrange the order within a component. And so this works really great for when we may have a cancel button here, or the submit button here on the right, and the cancel button is maybe the secondary style. And then I just go ahead and select this, switch the direction to vertical for mobile, and then the order to reverse. And now it allows us to have our submit button on top. And so I think this is a really cool technique. I think it's important to also be mindful of how often you should use it. It can really be powerful if you nest this in sort of a dialogue component, sort of a template, which we'll be working towards. But yeah, I hope this was helpful for you guys. Let me know if there's any questions y'all have in the comments. Let me know if this is something that you guys are planning to be using. And of course, any feedback you can give to help me improve these videos for you all, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.